Another episode now of the Emergency Shed Clean Out series. I'm not sure what part this is because I don't know how long it's going to take to do this episode, so look at the title and you guys will know what part it is. It's time to talk about the elephant in the room. Hey guys, Chris from the Ultimate Recycler. Let's go and have a look and I'll show you what I mean. When I say elephant, I mean engine. We have a 14.5 horsepower overhead valve Briggs Stratton engine, probably from a ride-on mower, that I've been stepping around for quite a while, and I'm sure you guys have noticed it in videos and thought, what's he going to do with that? Maybe scrap it out. It says spare parts on it. Let's take it through to the workbench and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Okay, these things are pretty heavy. I'm glad my shoulder's good these days. I'm still being careful with it though. Alright, what's the go with this? Let's just wipe some dust off it. Whoops. I have owned this engine for well over 10 years, and all I can tell you about it is that I purchased it from a garage sale. In fact, I didn't purchase the engine specifically from a sale. I bought everything at the sale. Now, it has $80. That's what the guy was asking. Spare parts is written on it. And I believe he used to do some lawnmower repairs as a bit of a backyarder. And this was at his garage sale. And I made him a deal on everything. And I took it all away and gave him some money. And we were both happy. And I've done pretty well out of the deal. I think it was over 10 years ago. And this engine sat in my shipping container for quite a while. Well, ever since then. And then it got moved here. We're going to work out what we're going to do with it. Now, it says parts. The guy told me it had blown up. And if any of you know Briggs & Stratton engines, you will know that when they get low in oil or they haven't been serviced for a long time, they create their own window into the sump. Yes, that's what happens with these often. The conrod seizes, basically self-destructs with lack of lubrication, and bits of the engine fly around inside until a piece actually decides to leave, and that's the exit hole. So clearly it was a major traumatic event, a major malfunction, and whoever owned it at the time probably just bought a new engine. I suspect it has hardly done any hours. It probably might have been an issue with the oil that was put in it from new. Whatever the reason, it's now spare parts. I'm not going to fix it. To fix it, you would need an entire new block and basically strip all the parts off it, and it would not be economical. But what are we going to do with it? Well, most people would probably just throw it in the scrap metal. Now, it could probably go as irony aluminium. The block is aluminium or cast aluminium. It's got plenty of weight in it. The crankshaft's going to be steel. The flywheel's going to be cast iron. I think there's a cast iron sleeve in the cylinder. I think these IC engines had cast iron sleeves. The piston's going to be aluminium. So you could take the starter motor off and throw that in with electric motors. But basically it's probably only worth a couple of dollars as dirty aluminium or irony aluminium. But I have a different plan. I'm gonna see if I can make good money, viable money, see if it's going to be economical for me to dismantle this engine and sell parts on eBay. Obviously we'll have to inspect the parts, but I would say everything's got pretty low hours, and for a start the starter motor on its own should bring much better than scrap metal price. So let's start dismantling it. We'll have a look at all the parts, we'll see what we reckon we can sell, and we will end up with the crankcase as scrap metal anyway. Okay, so time to dismantle, and I'm not going to sell individual little parts. I will probably leave the parts in groups, so we can probably offer the starter motor with the little covering shroud here. And likewise, when we sell perhaps the flywheel, we might include the ignition coil. We'll group them up a bit because I want to make it worthwhile. I don't want to sell parts for just $5 and have to package things. I'd rather get better money per sale. So I'll take we've got the dipstick assembly that can come off. Perhaps we can offer that up with the whole blower housing. Some of the stuff maybe is desirable, some of it may not. It's a little bit of an experiment. We'll see how we go. Now I don't think there's much oil in it, but there is a little bit of oil. There's certainly very little on the dipstick. And I guess there's going to be engine parts that break more often than others. There's a chance that this dipstick tube may be a sought after part. I'll do a little bit of research, but as I said, I don't want to just sell something for $5. If I put this with the cowling, perhaps we might get 20, 25. You've got to consider postage is going to be an issue on the heavier things as well, although I will offer pickup locally. All right, so I'll just keep dismantling. I'll group stuff out on the table and we'll have a look when I've got a few parts off. Be interesting when we get inside the engine to see how much damage happened. So while we're doing a bit of a fast-paced dismantle here, I'll have a bit of a talk to you about the reason why I might have contradicted myself earlier by saying this engine has, I think, very low hours, and yet I then talk about it wearing out, and as we'll see later, the oil in it was really black and the rings were badly worn. Well, it all comes down to maintenance, that key word. And you'll probably know people with flash cars and they look after them and they polish them and they wash them every weekend. But guaranteed, just about everyone ignores their lawnmower and doesn't change the oil, doesn't maintain it, rarely gets it serviced. And I'd suggest that this is a very typical example where it was probably still running on the original oil that was put in when it was purchased brand new. It may have been perhaps a little low by running hot and burnt off a bit of the oil and no one ever checked it. It could have even been overfull because that can cause problems and cause lubrication issues. So that's why I seem to have contradicted myself. Poor maintenance has led to premature death. Okay, I've got most of the peripheral stuff off the engine. I have to get the flywheel off. Everything seems in pretty good condition. It is a little dirty, but the carby seems good. There's not excessive wear. In fact, there's virtually no wear to the throttle shaft or anything, so that's good. It's got a fuel solenoid on it. We'll save the wiring looms as well. I inadvertently allowed a bit of oil to flow out where the dipstick was. I've been careful not to tip it up where the hole is in the crankcase, but yeah, forgot about the dipstick. I took it out. So anyway, that'll wipe up okay. It won't hurt the old bench. So we'll get the flywheel off. We'll get the rest of the just cowling pieces off. All these panels do is just direct the airflow from the fan down through past the cooling fins. I don't think they're going to be saleable at all. They'll just go in the scrap metal. I can't imagine any engine that needs repair that would need these panels. The little control lever setup's quite good though. That works very well. So that may well have a sale. I'm trying to keep the hardware with each bit. The ignition coil's okay, and the bolts are there for that. So the starter motor should be good. Like everything was operational, I believe, until it went bang. So all those parts are going to be in good operational condition. The air filter housing is pretty good. We've kept all the hardware with that as well. And perhaps the intake manifold can go, we might put that with the carby. The air filter itself isn't much good. It's probably the original air filter. So there's no market for a second-hand air filter. It's a genuine Briggs Stratton one. But yeah, I don't think we'll worry about trying to sell that. We will get the head off it. We'll probably sell the head and the valve rockers and the push rods and everything in one go. The spark plug looks very messy. I think the exhaust had a bit of a leak. It's all black from carbon around there. The flywheel is probably the next major thing to get off. And other than a few little accessories, I will take the head off first, and then we'll maybe try and drain what remaining oil is in it, and we'll turn it upside down and remove the sump, and we'll have a look at the carnage inside. Also, underneath the flywheel there will be a charging coil, like an alternator of sorts, so that can probably be sold as well. And the fan assembly, yeah, we might just group that together. I don't know how well that will sell. The cast iron flywheel is extremely heavy, so, again, postage is an issue. But anyway, we'll keep dismantling, and I'll show you what it looks like inside. Let's pull the rocker cover and the head off, and we'll see what it looks like in there. And we'll rotate the engine until both of the valves are open. So we should have clearance on the rocker arms. so there won't be any pressure on the push rods. Now we can take the head off. We'll leave all that assembled, I think. Okay, head's ready to come off. And we've got the push rods. I think one's aluminium and one's steel. So the exhaust rod's aluminium, I think. Oh no, the inlet rod. Doesn't matter. Anyone that needs the parts will know that. Alright, the head doesn't look too bad. There's no damage. A little bit of carbon, a bit dirty. We'll leave a spark plug in it for now. Okay, just having a look in the bore here, you can see evidence of cross-hatching, which is the original machining marks to the bore. So it certainly hasn't done very much work. It's done a bit, but there's no lip at all to the top of the cylinder where the rings travel up to. So it's probably more likely blown up from very poor operational maintenance, and there's certainly not excessive wear to tell me that it's done a lot of work. So that should indicate that things like the starter motor will be in really good condition. There was no wear to the throttle shaft and the carby. The valves, I may not take them out of the head, but I'd suggest that they're pretty good. I mean, the thing was running until it blew up, so other than a bit of carbon, it's probably going to be quite a usable head and valves. The push rods are okay, they're not bent or anything. So that's as far as we're going to go. Well, that's pretty well as far as we can go at the top end. Let's pull the flywheel off, and then we'll take the crankcase off and have a look at the damage inside. Interestingly, I found this little clamp just the other day in a box of junk, and I get to use it straight away. So what I've done there is I've just clamped it around the crankshaft, and I've inserted a bit of key steel into the keyway, which will enable us to lock the crankshaft and undo the bolt on this flywheel side. So there's a square hole here that will suit a 1/2 inch socket drive, and that will enable us to hold this end of the crankshaft. Very good. Lucky to find that the other day. A bit of jarring action has loosened the flywheel bolt. Usually doesn't take much. Now the flywheel doesn't just lift off, they're normally on a tapered crankshaft. The easiest way to get them off is to put the bolt back in, or if it's a nut on the end of the crankshaft, you'd put the nut back in and do it down to the level of the thread so you don't damage the thread. I'm just doing this so it's not done up tight against the flywheel, but there's enough threads into the crankshaft. And then we'll stand the engine upright so the flywheel's free, and I'll give it a decent thump right on the end of the bolt. It won't cause any damage, and it should just pop the flywheel off the taper. So I like to hit, you've got to hit fairly square. And there we go. It sometimes takes a few hits, but you don't belt it enough so that you damage the head of the bolt. But really, once it lets go, it's fine. It's instantly loose. It's not like it has to slowly slide off. So that should now lift off. It's on a key as well as a taper. There we go. And it's quite dirty in there, but we have some magnets in there underneath the flywheel. Sometimes the magnets do come off and people are looking for new flywheels. Other times the ring gear for the starter is damaged. So the flywheel and housing fan assembly I'll probably try and sell in one go. And here's the alternator windings, which gives you a little bit of a trickle charge to charge the battery up. So that'll come off in one assembly. There we go. I've never had one of these play up myself. I've never had to replace them, but people do buy them, so they must play up. Perhaps they rub through a wire somewhere. I don't imagine they're going to short out because they generate electricity. Perhaps they get damaged by mice or rodents with the wiring. Anyway, we might be able to sell that separately. So we just have a panel here on this side. We'll take off just for the sake of getting it. Oh, we won't even take it off, you know. No one's going to want that panel. And the engine block's going to go as irony aluminium, so it won't matter if there's a bit more iron on there. We have a governor arm down here, which I don't know if it's worth taking off or not. Probably not. It may be damaged inside. So all that remains really is to take the sump off and have a look inside the engine. These bolts were particularly tight on the threads, and I suspect someone's had the sump off this and they've put Loctite on them. I don't think that was normal from original, but they were very tight on the threads, and you can see there's some red compound on there. So I don't know what that means. Maybe someone did a job on this and didn't do a very good job, and that's why it exploded. Yeah, there's a lot of red compound on that one. I'm sure I think that's Loctite. And I don't know why you would need to put Loctite on the sump bolts. They should not come loose. We might be able to sell the sump. It doesn't appear to be damaged. And I'll just clean the bolts up. I don't want to sell it with Loctite on the bolts. For those that don't know, Loctite is like a thread glue, and it stops the bolts being easily undone. And even though I'd cracked them, they still took a lot of turning to get out of the thread area. All right, that should be all we need there. Let's put a little bit of lube around the oil seal to help it come off. And we just will have to give it a light tap. It's moving. So now we can take the sump off and see what damage has happened. Oh, the sump itself looks okay. Bit of sludge in there, but no damage that I can see. Okay, here we have the governor assembly, and it's an oil slinger. And that doesn't look damaged at all. So this spins around on the back of the cam and basically flings oil everywhere. So there's no pressure lubrication. It just relies on this throwing it all around the place. And the center part, as the revs increase, the centrifugal force pushes this button out, which pushes on this lever here, which has a linkage back to the carby. So when the engine starts to rev hard, this linkage will close the throttle on the carby to govern the revs. Now that appears to be in undamaged condition. So this lever should be fine. Now these are counterweight balancers. So whilst the engine is cranking over and the piston going up and down, the balancers move to counterbalance the weight and to stop vibration. All right, our cam should come out. There's our camshaft. Sometimes these can be bent when an engine self-destructs, and it's got a little decompression lever on it. So that allows you to pull, I'm not sure if you can see that. That little lever there allows you to pull the engine over with the rope, and that actually lifts one, I think it's the exhaust valve, lifts the exhaust valve a little bit so that you can pull it over easy with the rope. And when it fires, that flings out of the road. And you can see on this little round piece here, when this lever flings out of the road, the round piece goes flat, and therefore it doesn't lift the valve anymore and the engine runs properly. So at really low revolutions when you're pulling the rope, that will keep the valve the exhaust valve from seating properly and allows it to just pull over a little bit easier. So that cam looks good. Oh, you know what? It doesn't even look like the conrod's broken. I wonder what made the hole. Or whether someone put a new conrod in it and didn't realise there was a hole in the crankcase. That's really unusual. So it's definitely been a part. Let's take, this is the timing gear that drives the cam. And these counterweight balancers run on a big bush around the edge of the crankshaft. They don't look to be worn at all. So there's one bolt, we can take that out. Then we can access the bolts on the bottom of the conrod. And then we can take the actual piston out the top. And we can probably then lift the crank and the other counterweight right out. So we might as well pull it completely apart. These pieces here are the cam followers. So they just ride up and down on the camshaft, on the lobes, and then the push rods that we took out earlier sit in the top, and they go up and operate the rockers, which in turn push the valves down at the right time. So all these parts actually look quite good. It's a bit of a mystery as to what made the hole. All right, we'll get that bolt out. We'll remove the counterweight next. Okay, here's our first counterweight. I'll check the little bearing in there. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. No damage there. Now there's a linkage here that connects the two that can come out, or that allows them to oscillate, and the pin comes out. So now we can get to the bottom of the conrod. Well, that has not broken the conrod. I reckon someone's put a conrod in and did not notice that there was a hole in the crank. That is really weird. I've never seen that before. Normally I'll pull one of these engines apart and there's bits of cast aluminium broken up everywhere and it's bent things and it's, well, there's a hole through the sump, but that's all that's happened. Okay, I'm officially convinced that the guy that did work on this engine had, well, he was a shonky operator. He didn't know what he was doing, or he just knew enough to be dangerous. The bolts, the little bolts that go through the conrod are so incredibly tight, I've got to resort to the lump of pipe, and I still haven't cracked this one yet, and they're probably Loctited in. Maybe he was panicking that they'd undo while the engine was running, and he might have used a really strong Loctite. I've got to hold a spanner in here to stop the ratchet kinking sideways, and hopefully it undoes. Oh Jesus, that's tight. Oh, that's got it. It cracked, but that is way, way tighter than it should be. It's a wonder he didn't turn it off. So that's only got one, but that is not proper. Someone has been in here that should not have been. So perhaps this guy who was a backyarder was really a backyarder in the true sense of the term, and he really didn't know what he was doing. But I'm still totally puzzled as to why this seems to have a complete conrod. All right, we'll have to get the other one loose now. Okay, that should get us access. This one's probably just as tight. Oh, yep, it is. Geez, how are we going to hold that one? Up there, maybe. Oh, that's got it. That was amazingly tight. Okay, we can undo this now. Sorry you can't really see that. You just see me cursing and fighting with it. We'll get these conrod bolts out and have a look at them. And have a look. I'm interested to see what condition the crankshaft's in, because if it's not badly scored, we may be able to sell the crankshaft as well. And as for the conrod, I wonder if he bought a new one and put it in. And I wonder if he put a set of rings in it while he had it apart. So that's a little bolt that I had to lean on. There's no Loctite on it, but it's only a 5/16 hex, so they should not have been that tight. That's crazy. Let's get the other one out. Okay. And now the conrod cap. Well, it has been running on this. If it was new, the engine was running. And it doesn't look overly worn. So now we can push the piston out the top of the cylinder. Oh. We'll use the soft end of a screwdriver to lever it up. And that piston looks, yeah, oh, the oil ring looks well down. There's a few scuffs on the piston, it's quite usable. And the conrod is actually pretty usable as well, I think. We can check the ring gap anyway soon. Let's get the crankshaft out. There we go, and that looks good. Yeah, there's no scoring to that at all. That's a good crankshaft. I reckon we can try and sell that. That would be really expensive to buy as a spare part. We might sell it with the counterbalance weights and the conrod. So all we have left in here is the other counterbalance weight. And these are cast iron. If we weren't going to sell them, they could certainly go in our heavy melt steel. And we can see the damage now to the inside of the block there. Something's punched very hard against it and knocked a piece right out. But there's no fragments in here at all. There's a little bit of a score on the side here, where you have a little bit of clearance between the crank and something's jammed there and gouged the metal a bit. But that is so strange. Just feeling the bottom of the bore. There doesn't appear to be any wear. So I'm sure it's never done a lot of work. But this block is no good, obviously, because it's got a big hole through it. I might take the governor assembly out and it can go with the oil slinger. Okay, and there we have it. One dismantled Briggs Stratton engine. Surprisingly, a lot more parts inside are still serviceable. Certainly from what I was expecting to see. So, what do you think? Is it a worthwhile exercise? I think I'll leave this video here. I'll clean them all up and group them into saleable lots. I'll do a bit of research and we'll do a follow-up part to this episode. But what do you think? Will I make enough money to make it worth my while? Should I have put it all in the scrap in the first place? As we've got now, this block is just going straight in the dirty aluminium. There's a brass sleeve for the governor arm. I might just break out and put in the brass bin, but I'm not going to worry about trying to clean up the aluminium. The sump I think is probably saleable. That otherwise could go in the clean aluminium cast. You'd only need to take the rubber thing out there and the sump plug. But I think we can possibly sell it. So what are your guesses? Leave in the comments if you think it's a worthwhile thing. Maybe take a guess as to what value we can get. It obviously is going to take a while for me to clean it up and eBay it, and there will of course be eBay fees. But I think it's a fun experiment. We'll see how it turns out. Oh, just before we go, I've just sat the piston back in the cylinder to push a ring in. I've taken the rings off the piston, and there's a large ring gap. Look at that. The reason you stick the piston in is to get the ring square to the cylinder, and that is way bigger than what the ring gap should be. So there's definitely a lot of wear to the rings, even though it doesn't really show on the cylinder, which is interesting. And if we drop the oil ring in, which is this one, this is the bottom ring on the piston, it's just as bad. In fact, it's probably almost worse. It just flops in there. So the rings were well and truly worn down, and yet the cylinder wasn't so much. And I'd suggest, even though the engine doesn't look like it's done a lot of work, I'd suggest the work that it's done was probably just on its original oil, and it was never maintained, so it's worn out prematurely. The other thing it may have been is just really poor quality oil, or just poor maintenance of the engine with regards to keeping it cool. If you get a build-up of grass around the engine and it doesn't cool properly, it overheats, and you're going to have issues with your lubrication just not being able to keep things lubricated. So it's had a catastrophic event. Someone dodgy has fixed it. I don't know why they didn't notice a window in the crank. So it's really odd. I've never seen one like this before. But we'll finish this video up here. Hope you enjoyed your little lesson on air-cooled engines, on four-stroke engines. We will go ahead now and clean up some bits, try and eBay them and see how we go. And once I've finished eBaying the parts, I'll do another part then to this emergency storage shed cleanup series, and we'll run through the results and just see how we did. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you next video. Bye for now.